Well, welcome everyone to the Hills Church. It is great to see all of you and be here with you, whether you're joining us online or in person at one of our 4 campuses in Dallas, Keller, North Richland Hills, and West Fort Worth. It is great to see you today. I love getting the chance to see y'all. And we're continuing our series that we've called The Way of the Wise, looking at the book of Proverbs. And this is our 3rd week, so I thought it would make sense to kind of give a quick little recap to update you on what we've been talking about. And the very first week, we talked about how the book of Proverbs talks about this father that is like our heavenly Father who wants his children to have great lives. And so he calls his children to him, says, "Come here, I've got to talk with you. I really care about you. I want you to have a great life, and I need you to know your choices really matter. And your choices are coming after you. They're trying to get your attention, to pick their way. There's this way of wisdom and this way of foolishness, and they want to win your heart. So please choose the way of the wise because you're going to find life there." That's what the Father's communicating. Now, most people, if you ask them about the book of Proverbs, they're familiar with chapters 10 through 29, which is this collection of all these wise sayings and phrases, okay? A lot of people, when they think of Proverbs, they just think of these one-liners that you say and quote to each other. And the question is, what do those one-liners have to do with this speech from the Father? How are they connected? And here's how they're connected. The Father is saying, Solomon is saying, that if you take the path of the wise, if you use God and your fear of the Lord and Jesus as your North Star on all your choices, then when you live that out in every aspect of your life, it's going to look like these practical things with your family, with your home, your career, or your work, or like we talked about last week, if Christ is your Lord, if God and you're walking on the way of the wise, this is the kind of friend you're going to be, and these are the kind of friendships you're going to want to have. We said that God wants you to have a good life, and that you can't have a good life without good friends. And so this week, we're going to be looking at probably the most talked about theme in the book of Proverbs, which is our words, the things that we say. And so this week, I'm telling you that the big overarching idea is that our Father wants us to have good lives, and you must speak wisely to have a good life. Now, I have plenty of stories in my life where I have, as people say, put my foot in my mouth, okay? Where I have said something that I really wish I could take back. But I know I'm not alone, so here's what I want you to do for me. I want you to turn to your neighbor and you say, "I've put my foot in my mouth before." Go ahead. Now, I don't want you to feel too bad about this because I am someone who has also had some moments of saying some nice things. I've also had some moments of encouraging people or maybe having something wise to say every once in a while. So I think I'd like to also give you the chance to turn to your neighbor and say, "Hey, I've also said some smart things every once in a while too." Go ahead. All right, now that we got that out of the way, I want you to really reflect and think. I want you to really think about how many times in my life have I had the moment where I just thought, "Man, I wish I could take back what I just said. That was so foolish. I was in the doghouse for a long time because of that one." Or how many of you have had times where you have had someone text you, maybe 10 years later, maybe 5 years later, and say, "I don't know if you remember, but you told me this one time, and it changed my life. I've never forgotten that you said that." This first thing that Proverbs wants us to know about our words is that wise words bring life and foolish words bring ruin. Proverbs 16:24 says this, "Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones." I don't think the book of Proverbs thinks that if I break my arm, I should have someone start speaking nice to my arm and it's going to heal some bones. But what I think Proverbs knows is that there's just something about a wise or kind or encouraging word that's just like chicken soup for the soul. It just rejuvenates you, makes you feel more alive. And also, Proverbs 18:7 says that the mouths of fools are their undoing. What foolish people say is their undoing, and their lips are a snare to their very lives. This is our 3rd week in a row that we have used the word snare or ensnared when we're talking about how, hey, you be careful about this because if you're not careful, you will get trapped by this and it will lead to your death. I think part of why this message, it's so amazing about the Bible, is this message was literally written hundreds, thousands of years ago, and yet I think these words that we're going to read today are even more significant. Just think about it. There has never been a time in all of human history, there's never been a time like what we have right now of having access to people's words. Right now, I could go online and I could spend all day listening to what people are saying and letting it influence my life. There has never been a time in all of human history where my words, where your words could be more multiplied and amplified across the world. Just think about this. I don't know how possible this was maybe even 20 years ago, but there are people right now listening to what I'm saying in Africa, in Russia, in South America, all over the world. And so it is extra important. Now that we have even more ability to take our words and do a lot with them, that means everything that's true about the things that can go bad with our words is even more significant. And everything that's true that can be good with our words is even more significant. So let's talk about what does Proverbs and Jesus say about this is how the wise speak. I've got 3 things that I think in the book of Proverbs we can look at about this is how wise people talk. And the very first one is this: the wise speak honestly. For any words that you say to be wise, they must first be true. There has never, and there never will be, a moment where someone said, that was a really wise thing that you said, if it's not rooted in the truth. You know, the Bible doesn't say that Jesus speaks honestly. The Bible says Jesus is the truth, right? And, by the way, his enemy, his adversary, our enemy, Satan, the word Satan literally means deceiver, manipulator, someone who's going to lie to you. Jesus says that Satan is the father of lies, and that people who speak falsehoods are his children. And he says that people who know the truth, who walk in the ways of truth, are the children of the Father. I think another way that he would say it is, by the way, the truth will set you free, that's a good life, and that lies will ensnare you. Here's a passage from Proverbs 16, verse 13. Kings take pleasure in honest lips. They value the one who speaks what is right. Now, sadly, throughout all of human history, I can't always say that kings have valued people who speak what is right. But here's the point that the proverb is making. The point is that a king is someone who has all the influence, has all the power, all the ability to get anything and everything that they want. And yet, the only thing that they can't buy with money is someone speaking honestly to them. No amount of money, no amount of power can bless them like someone just saying an honest, true, and right word to them. You know, I thought about another passage I could use to make this point at Proverbs 24:26, where it says, an honest answer is like a kiss on the lips, but I thought, let's keep it PG this morning. Let's not do that one. So move that one off the screen. But now we're going to get to a second part of something Proverbs teaches us about how the wise speak that is really going to step on my toes more than probably any point I've probably made since I've worked here as a minister. The second thing is that the wise speak sparingly. That is not something that anyone has ever said about Drew Ritchie right there. You know, Drew, he doesn't talk a lot. Nope, no one's ever said that. I thought about saying the wise speak less. I thought about saying the wise speak with a filter. All of those could be true. The top counsel that the book of Proverbs gives, the number one thing it says when it's talking about our words is how we should probably use them less often. It even has a great line where it says, you know, there are foolish people that look smart if they just don't talk, if they are quiet. Proverbs 13:3 says this, those who guard their lips preserve their lives. You want to preserve your life? You want to have a good life? Be careful what you say. But those who speak rashly, that just say whatever comes to their mind, whatever they want, whenever they want, will come to ruin. Proverbs 18:13, to answer before listening, this is folly and shame. Wise people only speak after they have really listened, after they have really weighed their words and thought about it. Think about how many times you've weighed your words and thought, maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe I shouldn't post that. Maybe I shouldn't tweet that or send that in the group text. And here's the thing I also want to add. Most wise people, once they've weighed their words, end up saying, yeah, I'm probably not going to just say anything at all. But people who speak rashly, it is their folly and shame. One of our very first moments in the Bible of Jesus saying anything, we don't have anything on record of him speaking in the manger as a baby, but we do have this story from Luke 2 where he's a boy in the temple. His parents are trying to find him. They lost track of him somehow, and they're looking for him, and this is what it says in Luke 2:46. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers. What is he doing? Listening to them and asking them questions. This is the posture of the wisest person who ever lived. I'm going to listen and I'm going to ask questions before I speak. I have been blessed to have this mentor in my life who is someone that, you know that phrase where people say you're not a pro at something until you've done it for 10,000 hours? Nod your head if you know this idea. That you are a pro at it once you've done it for 10,000 hours. I have a mentor in my life that I believe has spent 10, 20, maybe even 30 hours of his life just being with God, that he is a pro at that. And every time we get together, you know what I always reflect? He speaks so slowly. His words carry so much weight. He's so quiet. Every time we get together for lunch or dinner, I always leave shaking my head thinking, I spoke the whole time and he's the wise person, right? I should have been quiet and let him talk. I can tell you there's so many things in my life that I can quote from him because when you speak less and you speak sparingly and you weigh your words have more significance. Your words carry more weight. I think about it in executive team meetings. It's full of at our church, there's full of all these people that I admire and respect, and some of the folks don't talk as much as me. So literally everyone in the room talks less than me. And there's times where there are people sitting there and I'm thinking, man, I wish he would speak up. I wish she would speak up, because every time they do, I am hanging on their every word because I know they're wise. And they know part of why we're hanging on every word is because they're not talking as much as Drew in those meetings. All of us need to think about how we should speak slower, speak less, and really weigh our words, and sometimes maybe not even speak at all. The third idea of the book of Proverbs is of how the wise speak is that the wise say the right things at the right time in the right way. We can all think of examples where you said the right thing, but your tone and your timing was foolish. Or you maybe had the great tone, you maybe had the great timing, but your words were foolish. Or we've had those moments where we had the right tone and we had the right words, but because we decided to say it to our wife at 11 p.m., it was foolish, right? Chris and Stacy Hatchett, one of our ministers who are at the Keller campus, they do a marriage class, and one of their best lessons I ever took away is don't say something controversial to your spouse in the 5 minutes that you wake up in the morning, in the 5 minutes before you go to work, in the 5 minutes after you get home from work, or the 5 minutes before you go to bed. Don't pick that timing. Anything you say will be foolish if you decide to say it in those times. Proverbs 25:15 says this, through patience, through waiting for the right time, a ruler can be persuaded. But then I love this second part. And a gentle tongue, the right tone, can break a bone. How great is that line? It's a great line. If you just have a gentle tone, you can snap a bone because it's so persuasive. Proverbs 15:23, a person finds joy in giving an apt reply, an appropriate, this is what needs to be said for this situation. And how good is a timely word? The way we like to say this today is when someone speaks to us and you say, you know, you have no idea how much I needed to hear that today. You've said that before, right? Or you've had someone say that to you. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. That's what this proverb is saying. Jesus, we can look at so many stories of how Jesus spoke wisely, and yet as I was processing, I thought, you know what? There is a story in John 8 that encompasses all these ideas. Jesus speaking honestly, him speaking sparingly, and also him saying the right thing at the right time in the right way. And so I want to look at that with y'all now. It's in John 8, and in John 8, there's this story of this woman who the teachers and the Pharisees have caught in the act of adultery. Many scholars even believe that they set it up, that they are the ones that instigated what needed to happen so they could catch her. And they bring her to Jesus and they say, listen, the law says that we should stone her. What do you say? Because they're trying to trap him, trying to get him to say something foolish that could get him in trouble. And this is what it says in the story, John 8, 6 through 11. I want you to think about all the factors of everything I've been saying, how Jesus is silent, how Jesus speaks, what he says, to who he says it to. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and he said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first one to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away, one at a time, the older ones first. By the way, I think that should mean the wiser ones. They got it. They started to leave. Until only Jesus was left with the woman standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, I believe calmly, with love, gentleness, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. And then with total wisdom and honesty, "Go now and leave your life of sin." Look at how Jesus did this. Jesus knew he had the ability to speak intense fire to the teachers and the Pharisees of the law without becoming overcome with anger. He was zealous for justice and the truth. He was able to do this. He was able to be silent and process. He didn't say, "All right, y'all, you asked me, it's time for a 30-minute message on this topic." No, that's not what he did. And he also had the ability, it says in Isaiah, there's a prophecy about him that it says, a bruised reed he will not break. He was able to be gentle with the marginal, with the mistreated, with someone like that, and honestly treat her well. This is something that Jesus was able to do. And you're probably wondering, well, how do I learn how to do that? How do I learn when's the moment to be stern with my child? How do I learn the moment when it's time to be a warm blanket with my child? How do I learn how to discern how to speak to a coworker when it's time to be kind of the tough love moment, or is it the encouraging moment? How do I discern that, like Jesus here? The answer is you abide with Jesus. You get a relationship with wisdom himself, and more as you walk down the path, you will become wiser about what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. Now, the next big thing that Proverbs talks about with our words, it's very important, is that our words have great power. And with great power comes, come on, great responsibility. Come on, you know what I was talking about. With great power comes great responsibility. You know, James is, it's New Testament wisdom literature. Proverbs is Old Testament wisdom literature. James is one of our books that's New Testament wisdom literature. And in chapter 3, it talks a lot about how your tongue is this very small thing in your body, this tiny thing right here, okay? And yet it has immense power to do a lot of things. Like the small rudder on a whole big ship, it can turn the ship. Like a small spark in a fire can start a huge forest fire. That is what your tongue has the power to do. This is one of my, when I was thinking about this, I thought of those funny jokes where a comma is this really small thing in a sentence, but if you put it in the wrong place or you take it out, it can have a big impact on the sentence. Here's a good example here, this first one. With the comma, it's, "Hey, let's eat, Grandpa." But if you take out this comma, it's, "Let's eat, Grandpa," right? This makes a huge difference in this sentence. This tiny little mark in this sentence makes a very big deal. Proverbs 18:21 says this. This is my favorite verse in the whole sermon. "The tongue has the power of life and death." This small thing has the power of life and death. "And those who love it, those who love to talk, guilty, will eat its fruit." If you speak a lot like me and you're speaking wise, good things, you are going to eat the good fruit of that. But if you are speaking foolishly or evil or mean, you are going to eat its fruit. You got me? Does that make sense? Nod your head if you're with me. This is a big deal. And so here are two ways that Proverbs said that our words have great power. This first one is this: our words have great power to infiltrate your heart and your mind. I want you to think for a second just how easy it is for someone to say something to you and it to crawl its way into your brain and just sit there and eat at you all day. How many times someone has said something that it's crawled into your heart and it started to take seed for good things. Let's focus for a second on the negative though. Let's focus on that. How many of you have had a terrible day because all it took was you came into work and someone said, "Man, you look tired today." You're like, "Oh, I look that bad? Oh my word." And the whole rest of the day, it's, yeah, today's gonna be a rough one because they didn't mean anything mean, but they're like, "You look tired today." And now I want you to think though, how many times just small words when you were a kid can take seed in someone's heart and bear fruit for their whole life. I've got a few examples for you. Kids have this way of sadly saying things with no filter because they're young, they haven't gotten wise yet, where they'll say something like, you're not pretty. Kids will say that, and guess what? People will live with that their whole life because it'll infiltrate their heart and their mind. Kids will say, no one likes you. And people will think, well, that's my identity. I'm that person that no one likes. Kids will say, every time you're around, you just mess everything up. By the way, sadly, adults say everything I just said too. And if we're not careful, words have great power to take root in our hearts and our minds that is who I am. That's who we are. That phrase, whoever said, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, is wrong. That is a very foolish phrase. If anything, I would argue the world has had way more harm from words than from sticks and from stones. So, here is a proverb. Proverbs 12:18 says this, the words of the reckless pierce like swords. Picture somebody just walking around with a sword, not thinking about it. Before they know it, there's a bunch of people like bleeding all around them. But the tongue of the wise brings healing. So now let's get positive. How many of you have had moments where someone has spoken a word to you that's made your day? Someone said man, you look really nice today. Thank you. I love your dress. I love your haircut. That looks amazing. And it just brightens your day. You have a great rest of your day. I have a drawer in my office full of cards that people have written me over my years of ministry. And many of the cards in that drawer are from people who are a part of the Hills Church. And I thought, you know what, for this sermon, let me just open this up and see if there's any examples in here. So I opened it up and I found one of my favorite ones from when I was preaching at Clifton before this. It says this, Drew, you have always been a pleasure to have around. There are very few people that I really think a lot of, and you are the only preacher. Thanks for being you. That's a sweet card. That one makes me smile. It's a great, kind note. A little bit of a dig, but it's very sweet. Now I want you to imagine. All right, so I told you there's words that can bless our day. What about those words that people say that can bless our life? That if we let them infiltrate our hearts and our minds, words like, I'm proud of you, from a coach or a parent or a teacher. Words from a graduation or some big moment in our lives where someone gets up with a microphone and says, you have changed my life. I am a better person because we were friends. You have a gift. Did you know that? You can really sing. Nick Dunbar recently, one of our worship ministers, gave a talk about at the age of 9, one of the deacons at his church said, you've got a gift for singing. You need to get up here and sing more. That changed his life because that word infiltrated his heart and his mind and he believed it as true about who he was. What about the words when you introduce a friend and you say, this is and you say their name. And she is one of the most hospitable, kind, gracious people that I know. Every single time my dad introduces me to anyone, anywhere we are, for my whole life, we're meeting people, my dad will say, this is my son in whom I love and in whom I am well pleased. I let those words infiltrate my heart and my mind, and everywhere I go, I know that I am my dad's son, and he is very proud of me, and that infiltrated my heart and my mind. In Mark 5, we have this beautiful story of this woman who's lived her whole life, or not her whole life, she's lived 12 years with this bleeding issue, where she can't get well, where she's ostracized because she's not allowed to be around people. And you know what her identity probably is? She's like, I'm that girl. I'm the one everyone knows in town, well, she's the one who's sick. She's the one that you're not allowed to get around. That's her identity. And yet in Mark 5, when Jesus heals her, the very first words he says to her are, daughter. That's the identity he's claiming, and he's hoping will infiltrate her heart and her mind. There's a book called The Life of the Beloved by an author named Henry Nouwen. It's one of my all-time favorite books. He's a theologian, a professor, and he was a professor, I want to say at Yale or Princeton or something, and he left being a professor and he went to go work at a adult special needs community as the chaplain. And he writes about it. And in this chapter, there's a scene where this lady from the community, a special needs adult, says to him, her name's Janet, she says, would you give me a blessing? And he instinctively goes, sure. And he makes the sign of the cross on her forehead. She said, no. I want a real blessing. He said, okay, well, come back tonight for devotional worship. We'll do that. And so they come back later at night. He says, are you ready? And he didn't even know what she would do. And she jumps up, she runs and gives him this huge hug. And he's a priest, and so he says that the robes of his garment wrap around her. And he speaks a word of blessing to her. And you know what happens next? More people say, I want a blessing. More people say, I want that. Before long, he ends up blessing the entire special needs community. But in his book, he writes that one of the more touching moments is when this 24-year-old volunteer, and I like to imagine that this volunteer is not a believer in Jesus, raises his hand and says, "What about me? Do you have a blessing for me?" He says, "Yeah, come here." He puts on his hands on his shoulder and he says, "John, it is so good that you are here. You are God's beloved son. Your presence is a joy for all of us. When things are hard and life is burdensome, always remember that you are loved with an everlasting love." And as he finished those words, John looked up at him with tears running down his eyes, said, "Thank you. Thank you very much. No one's ever talked to me like that before." And this is what Nouwen writes next. He says, "That evening, I recognized the importance of a blessing and being blessed and reclaimed it as a true sign of the beloved of God. The blessings that we give each other are expressions of the blessing that rests on us from all eternity. It is the deepest affirmation of our true self. We can use our words to infiltrate each other's hearts and minds with this message." If any of you are here today, if your friend invited you, if you're listening to my voice and you're thinking, "I don't know about this Jesus thing. I've been wondering if I want to do this or not. I can't really decide." I want you to hear me now. You are loved. Jesus knows your name and he's known you from before you were born. And are you tired? Are you fed up with what the world has to offer, that this gap in your heart, nothing is able to fill? Jesus wants to offer you something that will last, that is truly good, that will never fail you. And I pray that the words that I just spoke will infiltrate your heart and your mind so you'll keep coming back for more, because I believe words have great power to do that. Now, this second thing that words have power to do, this second big idea of Proverbs, is that words have great power to spread. We just saw this in this story. Janet started first, and what happened before long? Everybody wanted a blessing. But this point, it's very simple. Word travels fast, period. You don't get to decide whether good words travel fast and far and bad words stay close right around you. No. A good word or a bad word travels fast. We've experienced how fast gossip and rumors travel. I think about friends that literally had to transfer schools because of the power of a rumor to spread throughout the school. That is the power of words, for good or for bad. I've also witnessed the power of getting a phone call saying, "Hey, I heard the good news, congratulations." What? I just texted one person 2 minutes ago. How are you already texting me back? Proverbs 16:27 says this, "A scoundrel," you didn't expect to get scoundrel today at church, did you? "A scoundrel plots evil, and on their lips it is like a scorching fire." And then Proverbs 10:11 says this, "The mouth of the righteous is a fountain, overflowing, pouring out, full of life." Whenever I read this, my mind immediately went to the John 4 story of the woman at the well, where Jesus comes and he says, "You're looking for water, and I am going to offer you an eternal, everlasting water that will overflow in your life and everything around you." And then when she takes this word in, when it infiltrates her heart and her mind, the very next thing that happens is that the word spreads. It overflows. We see in the text in John 4 that many people in that town believed in Jesus because of the woman's testimony. Words have great power to spread. So I have one last idea that we got to talk about. This is a very big idea, and I think kind of summarizes this whole message. Jesus used his words for creating life and purpose. At the very beginning of the Bible, we're told that the world is formless and void. It has no form, it's completely empty, and then it says that there are these dark, chaotic waters that the Spirit comes and hovers over. And then what happens? God speaks, and life comes, order comes, purpose and function is brought. Hey, you're going to start becoming the day. You're going to start becoming the night. You're going to become the land. You're going to become the sea. He brings order and life and purpose. And he says, this is your job of what you're going to do. And ever since, God and Jesus have used their words to speak life and order and purpose. When the seas are raging, Jesus speaks and says, be still, and he brings order to the waters. When the leaders and the teachers are deceiving and they are bringing corruption, Jesus speaks truth to them. When a man is in bondage to a demon, Jesus speaks freedom. When a woman needs healing after years of bleeding, Jesus speaks identity and says, you're my daughter. When Peter has gone back to fishing and Peter thinks, you know what, I've lost my shot of being a disciple, Jesus speaks purpose and says, I've got big plans for you. When we think about our words, we may not be able to speak and the oceans obey what we say, but we do have great power to speak the way that Jesus talked. Think about it. We say this a lot. We're going to be with Jesus, we're going to become like Jesus, and we're going to do the things he did. Today's sermon is we are going to speak like Jesus spoke, or we're going to speak like Jesus is still speaking. God has given us this spirit where every one of us has the opportunity every day to speak order, to speak truth, to speak freedom, to speak life and identity to people. That mentor I was talking about earlier, he's someone that people like to refer to as like a modern monk. That's what they like to say about him. And he said, you know, there's this misnomer with monks. People believe that monks take a vow of silence, that they're never going to talk. He said, that's not really true. What monks do is we take a vow that we will speak only what love requires. Because this mentor of mine is wise, and he knows that words are a precious commodity, and you should only use them like Jesus would, for life, for purpose, for identity and bringing order to things, and not use our words for chaos and disorder, for bringing death into situations, because our words have the power to do all of that. Now, normally in a sermon, this is where I would pray over us, where I would say, all right, everybody, let's pray. And I don't want to do that today because today has been about the power of our words. So what I'd like to invite you to do at every campus, I'd like to invite you to close your eyes, and I'd like to invite you to put your hands out in front of you. And I want to speak a word of blessing to you because I believe that these words have great power to infiltrate your heart and your mind and to spread. It is so good that you are here. I want you to know that you are God's beloved child. You are precious in God's eyes. Our world is a better place because you're here in it. You have a combination of talents and gifts and passions that no one else has ever had and no one else will ever have again. I know that you have moments of sadness and fear, but I want you to remember who you are. You are a very special person, deeply loved by God, fearfully and wonderfully made, and all the people here are for you and with you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and give you peace. And I say all these words in the name of Jesus. Amen.